Welcome to the deep dive where we take your sources and really dig deep to unearth the most important insights. Today, we're doing a fascinating deep dive into a topic that, well, for many, is kind of a hidden strategic lever. It's the often surprising impact of age on Social Security disability or SSD eligibility. You shared some incredibly detailed sources with us, and our mission today is really to pull back the curtain on how your age isn't just a number. It's a crucial strategic factor in securing your SSD benefits. Did you know that approval rates for SSDI claims can skyrocket with age? Seriously, we're talking applicants age 60, 65, potentially enjoying up to a remarkable 62% approval rate. Compare that to significantly lower figures for younger groups. When I first saw that statistic, honestly, my jaw dropped. It truly highlights just how profound the impact of age can be. So what does this all mean for you and your unique situation?
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here is how the Social Security Administration, the SSA, doesn't just passively observe age. They've actually built it directly into their evaluation process. It's like they're recognizing the evolving realities of work capacity as we get older. We'll explore exactly how these age-based considerations can influence every single stage of an SSD claim,
Yes.
from the initial application right through to advanced strategies. It can potentially turn a denial into an approval.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we dive into where age truly becomes, a game changer, let's quickly refresh on the core principles. We're basically talking about two main types of benefits: Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, for folks who've paid into the system through work credits.
Right, the insurance model.
Exactly. And then there's Supplemental Security Income, SSI, which is for those with limited income and resources, regardless of their work history.
The SSA defines disabilities pretty strictly. It's a medically determinable impairment that lasts, or is expected to last, at least 12 months or result in death. And crucially, it has to prevent you from engaging in substantial gainful activity, or SGA. Think of SGA as working enough and earning enough to be considered, let's say, financially independent by their standards. For 2025, that SGA threshold is earning above about $5,570 per month for most individuals. So this raises the key question: where does age actually fit into all this? Well, the SSA uses a 5-step sequential evaluation process. Think of it like a series of gates you need to pass through. Now, age is kind of considered from the very first gate, but its impact becomes most pronounced and strategic in steps 4 and 5.
Okay, can you walk us through those steps quickly? Just the headlines.
Sure. Step 1. Are you currently working above those SGA levels? If yes, you're generally not considered disabled. Step 2. Is your medical condition severe enough? Does it significantly limit basic work activities? Step 3. Does your condition meet or equal one of their listed impairments? These are conditions considered so severe, things like specific cancers or advanced organ failure. If your medical records meet the SSA's very strict criteria for a listing, you're often approved quickly. The impairment itself is basically disabling by definition.
Got it. Like a fast track for the most severe cases.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Then step 4. Can you still perform your past relevant work? So the jobs you've done before. Here, age starts to subtly impact how they assess your skills and the physical demands of your old job.
Okay.
And finally, step 5. Can you adjust to other work that exists in the national economy? This is the big one. This is where those age categories truly kick in, with stricter rules for people under 50 and, frankly, significantly more favorable ones for those 50 and older.
Okay. So let's take an example. Like Sarah, a hypothetical 40-year-old factory worker from Virginia with chronic back issues. For her, the bar is much, much higher.
Much higher.
She really has to prove that basically no jobs anywhere in the national economy, not even a simple desk job, suit her limitations.
Exactly.
But then you take someone like Robert, maybe a 60-year-old Virginia factory worker, similar back issues. The SSA applies more lenient considerations.
That's right.
And it's not just like being nice. It's a strategic element built into the system. Can you maybe elaborate on how the SSA's thinking shifts for Sarah versus Robert at those later steps, especially step 5?
Absolutely. The core difference really boils down to adaptability. For Sarah, the 40-year-old, the SSA basically assumes a younger person has a greater capacity to learn new skills, to retrain, to transition to different types of work, even if it's completely different from her past factory work.
Yeah.
But for Robert, the 60-year-old, the SSA explicitly acknowledges that with age, adapting becomes significantly harder. Adapting to new work environments, especially ones needing retraining or totally different physical demands, it's just tougher. And this isn't just a vague assumption. It's actually codified in their rules and guidelines.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting then. Because the SSA actually categorizes applicants by age. And these categories, they directly illustrate this impact of age on eligibility. It's almost like your birth year slots you into a different rule book.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. These groups, They call them younger individual, ages 18 to 49, approaching advanced age, 50-54, advanced age, 55-59, and closely approaching retirement age, 60 plus. They guide how the agency views your ability to adapt. These categories are absolutely crucial for Robert, our 60-year-old example. He's placed right in that most favorable bracket.
Let's talk numbers then. What do these categories mean in terms of actual approval rates and strategy?
Okay, let's look at the numbers. For younger individuals, 1849, like Sarah, approval rates often hover somewhere around 42% for those in their 40s. The SSA assumes greater flexibility, so you need really extensive evidence showing no alternative employment is feasible. It's a tough sell.
Right.
Then as you hit approaching advanced age, 50-54, approval rates see a pretty significant bump, up to about 49%. The SSA starts introducing a bit more leniency here, especially if you have limited education or skills that don't easily transfer to, say, desk work.
Okay, a noticeable jump.
Definitely. Then advanced age claimants, 55 to 59, they enjoy around 57% approval rates. The SSA recognizes a significantly diminished capacity for retraining at this point.
Wow, over half.
Yeah. And finally, the highest approval rates go to those 60 and older, like Robert. That's where we see that remarkable 62% number. At this age, the rules heavily favor finding someone disabled, even if they could theoretically do some lighter work. Age itself becomes a very strong factor.
And thinking about our hypothetical Virginia workers, Sarah and Robert, factors like the urban-rural divide could matter too, couldn't they? An older worker like Robert, maybe in a rural Appalachian part of Virginia, might face even tougher challenges finding any suitable work locally compared to someone in, say, Richmond.
Absolutely. That local context matters. Limited job options in a rural area can definitely strengthen the case for an older claimant. It makes the "can you adjust to other work" question much harder to answer with a yes.
So identifying your age category is really the first step in figuring out your strategy and leveraging your age.
Exactly. And that brings us to the medical vocational guidelines, or what everyone calls the grid rules. These are really the cornerstone of SSD determinations, especially at step 5. This is where the impact of age is truly quantified using this matrix of factors. Imagine like a complex spreadsheet the SSA uses. On this grid, they plot your age category. What you can still physically and mentally do, that's your residual functional capacity, or RFC.
Okay.
Your education level, and your past job skills. All those things intersect on the grid. And consider this stark contrast. A 45-year-old like Sarah, maybe high school education, sedentary RFC meaning she can only do desk work and she had skilled past work. The grid might very well direct a finding of not disabled.
Right, because she's young and has skills.
Exactly. But shift that same person to age 55, a Robert example, with the exact same profile, same education, same sedentary RFC, same past skills. The grid often mandates an approval.
Just based on age.
Just based on crossing that age threshold on the grid, it dramatically showcases the escalating power of age within their system. The grid rules can literally override what a vocational expert might say about jobs being available if your profile fits into a disabled cell on that grid.
That's incredible. And you mentioned data supporting this.
Yeah, the statistics are pretty clear. People are roughly twice as likely to get SSDI approved at age 50 compared to age 40, and then again, twice as likely at 60 compared to 50.
Wow.
It's not just chance. These grid rules explicitly acknowledge that as you get older, adapting to new jobs gets significantly harder, especially if you have physical limitations. It's built right in.
So, expert, what about someone who's just shy of hitting that next, more favorable age category? Like maybe our Sarah is 49 and a half. Is she just stuck, or can the SSA ever, bend the rules a bit for that borderline age?
That's a great question. And yes, it's a really critical strategic point people should know about. Even in those borderline situations, say you're 49 in a few months, just nearing that 50-54 category, the SSA does allow the use of the higher age group if the evidence justifies it. It emphasizes the flexible and, frankly, quite powerful impact of age. So Sarah, at 49, could potentially be evaluated under the rules for a 50-year-old if her medical evidence and vocational profile strongly support that she has limitations more typical of the older age group.
Okay, that's really good to know. So now that we understand how age matters, let's translate this into actual actionable steps for someone applying. The strategies must differ quite a bit based on your age bracket, right? Let's start with applicants under 50, like Sarah. Navigating this requires meticulous preparation, I imagine. This seems like the toughest group, with those lower approval rates, often below 40%, mainly because the SSA just assumes you're more adaptable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For you, if you're under 50, it's about proving not just that you have a disability, but really hammering home the permanence and inadaptability.
Right.
You need to focus relentlessly on irrefutable medical and vocational evidence. Compile everything. Comprehensive medical records, detailed doctor's notes, imaging results, functional capacity evaluations. These need to detail precisely how your impairment prevents even simple desk jobs. You need to actively engage your treating physicians. Get them to provide detailed statements about your limitations, explaining why you can't perform basic work tasks consistently day in and day out.
What about vocational evidence, like trying to work?
Yes, definitely document any failed work attempts. If you tried different jobs, even part-time, and couldn't sustain them because of your condition, that's powerful evidence against the adaptability assumption. Also, document any vocational rehabilitation efforts. If you tried retraining and it didn't work out, show that. In Virginia, for example, you could utilize state programs like the Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services, DARS, for assessments. These can bolster your case by showing that even with support, returning to work wasn't feasible. You might even consider hiring an independent vocational expert. They can analyze job market data specific to your limitations and argue that suitable positions just don't exist for you.
Good point.
And crucially, don't neglect non-exertional limitations. Things like chronic pain, severe fatigue, mental health issues like depression or anxiety, concentration problems. These often compound physical limitations and can rule out even simple, unskilled jobs. Make sure these are well documented.
And here's a critical tip we touched on. Persistence matters, right? Don't just give up after an initial denial.
Absolutely not. The statistics show over half of appeals ultimately succeed. So an initial denial is often just the first step. Persistence truly pays off, especially if you can gather more evidence or maybe you cross into a more favorable age category during the appeal process.
Okay, that makes sense for the under 50 group.
Yeah.
Now let's flip it. For applicants age 50 and older, like our Robert example, the impact of age shifts pretty dramatically in your favor, doesn't it? Those grid rules we talked about provide built-in advantages that you really need to leverage.
That's exactly right. At 50, the SSA officially considers you less adaptable to new work, especially if your past skills don't easily transfer to something like sedentary work. And that's why we see those approval rates climb steadily. You have 49% for 50-54, 57% for 55-59, and that really high 62% for 60-65. It directly reflects the SSA's official recognition of age-related declines, maybe reduced stamina, slower healing times, or just finding it harder to learn completely new job skills.
So strategically, what should older applicants focus on?
You want to strategically emphasize how common conditions often worsen with age. Things like diabetes, arthritis, heart conditions. Point out how age exacerbates these issues and further limits your work options. This can be particularly relevant in places like Virginia with its diverse economy. If you worked in a physically demanding job, those conditions might hit harder, making adjustment to other work less likely. Also, at hearings, vocational testimony often ends up supporting older claimants because, realistically, fewer jobs genuinely accommodate their specific combination of limitations, work history, and age. The grid rules often back this up.
And you mentioned borderline age earlier.
Yes. Leverage those borderline age rules if you're close to the next category, say 54 approaching 55. Argue that your profile fits the older category's limitations.
Plus, you mentioned potential expedited processing.
Yeah, under certain grid rules, particularly for those 55 and older with significant limitations, there can sometimes be expedited processing. It's not guaranteed, but it can speed things up considerably.
And thinking longer term, for many older folks, SSDI can be a crucial bridge, right? Leading right into their full retirement benefits.
Absolutely. It provides that financial security during years when working is no longer possible, smoothly transitioning them towards retirement age. It's an important part of overall financial planning for many in that situation.
Okay, this is all incredibly helpful. Now let's tackle some common misunderstandings. There seem to be quite a few myths floating around about age and SSD eligibility, and these could definitely derail someone's claim if they believe them. Let's separate fact from fiction.
Good idea. Myth number 1. Hitting age 50 automatically guarantees approval. That's definitely false. You still absolutely need solid medical proof of a disabling condition that meets SSA's criteria. Age helps, but it doesn't replace medical evidence.
Risk too.
That younger people simply can't win SSD benefits. Also false. It's undeniably harder, the statistics show that, but with strong, compelling evidence proving inability to do any work, approvals definitely happen for younger individuals.
Okay.
Some people think age becomes the only factor that matters after 50. Not true. Education, your residual functional capacity, RFC, and your specific work history are all weighed equally alongside age on those grid rules. And specifically for Virginia residents, sometimes you hear rumors about special state-specific age rules. Remember, SSD is a federal program. The core age rules and grid rules apply nationwide, even if local economic factors play a role in Step 5.
That's important.
And finally, a big one. Believing an initial denial is the end of the road. That overlooks the entire multi-stage appeals process, where your age, possibly combined with new evidence or worsening condition, can be reevaluated, often leading to approval later on.
So while the core rules are federal, you mentioned that the impact of age can manifest uniquely in a state like Virginia because of its specific regional economics and demographics. How exactly do these local nuances play out in practice for Virginians?
Yeah, Virginia is a really good example of this interplay between federal rules and local reality. You've got a real mix. Major urban hubs like Richmond or Northern Virginia, but also large rural areas like in Appalachia. For an older worker in one of those rural areas, job availability might be significantly lower than in the cities. This limited local job market, combined with their age and limitations, makes the argument that they can't adjust to other work much stronger. It enhances their claim at Step 5.
That makes sense. What about approval rates at hearings in Virginia?
Virginia's hearing approval rates generally track the national averages, usually somewhere in the 50–60% range. But it can vary a bit between specific hearing offices within the state, maybe depending on caseloads or specific judge tendencies. Also, think about common disabilities. In Virginia, with historical ties to industries like manufacturing or mining, musculoskeletal issues might be more prevalent. These often worsen significantly with age, amplifying their impact on disability claims for older workers in the state.
What about processing times in Virginia? Any different?
Processing times generally average 12–18 months nationwide, and that largely holds true for Virginia as well. It's a long wait, unfortunately. However, those compassionate allowances for extremely severe conditions can speed things up significantly, and that applies everywhere, including Virginia, regardless of age.
So any final advice for Virginia residents specifically?
It's always a good idea to connect with local resources, use your local SSA field office, consider consulting with attorneys who are familiar not just with SSD law, but specifically with Virginia's vocational data and economic landscape. They can tailor arguments more effectively. And just a heads up for 2025, while there aren't major changes to the age rules themselves planned, the updated HEA limits do affect eligibility thresholds for everyone, so staying informed about those yearly updates is key.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it's just crystal clear, isn't it? Your age isn't merely a number on your birth certificate when it comes to Social Security disability. It's a deeply embedded strategic factor. It influences everything from how your claim is initially evaluated right through to the specific evidence you absolutely need to gather. Understanding these nuances, how the rules shift for Sarah versus Robert, can truly empower you to navigate this complex system more effectively.
Absolutely. And maybe stepping back from the individual claim for just a moment, it's interesting to think about how the SSA's recognition of age and disability claims sort of subtly reflects broader societal shifts. Shifts in work longevity, the challenges of an aging workforce. What does this tell us about how we as a society value different kinds of work and adaptability throughout a person's career? And how do our social safety nets try to adapt or maybe struggle to adapt to those changes?
It's definitely a fascinating question to maybe mull over long after this deep dive ends. Well said. We really hope this deep dive has provided you with some aha moments and, more importantly, truly actionable insights you can use. We're always here to help you get well informed, quickly, and thoroughly. Until next time, keep exploring.